Okay, so everybody's been freaking out this year about Golden State. 73-9, best regular season record ever. Also, the three-pointers are insane. The first team ever to get over 1,000 three-pointers in one season. Obviously, there's a correlation between the two. Now, the question is how dependent they are on the three-pointers. For me, I thought, if they didn't have the three-point shot, they'd probably be a lower seed. They would probably make the playoffs, but be a lower seed. So that's my thought. I don't know what your thinking is on this. Take a second, think about where you think Golden State would finish if there's no three-point line. The results may surprise you. They surprised me right away. So the question is, how do we figure this out? How do we even come to some logical way of figuring out how the three-point has helped Golden State? Well, the only way I really could find to do that is to look at a world without three-pointers. Over here on the left, obviously, are the games. Here are Golden State's three-pointers, then the opponent's three-pointers, and then what I did is I came up with an alternate reality where I looked to see what it would be like if we had no three-pointers. So that's basically simple. All you do is you take and you subtract the number of three-pointers from the team's final score and come up with a final here. This was the first example. When they would have gone 10-0 instead, they lose the game. So what you do is you just subtract the number. This game, 18-3 on three-pointers. Obviously, the three-pointers made a difference. So what I did is I subtracted 1 point for every three-pointer, which would make they would get 2 points instead of 3 points. That's the only logical way to do this. So under that, as you look on this side, their first loss would have been game 10. Instead of being 10-0, they're 9-1. So that's a long way to go for the three-pointer to become relevant. Now, a couple times in here, we've got tie scores. I gave them half of the wins on overtime and half of the losses because, frankly, I think they probably would win more, but let's just err on the side of caution with that. Then you look, instead of being, this is insane. They went 24-0. That nobody even got close to that. That's just friggin' insane. So the next loss would be the Utah game. They won by 3, but they did a lot more on three-pointers. So there you go. They lose that game. They lose a close game at Toronto because they out-threed the hell out of them. Now, the green here is an interesting statistic. This is the first time somebody shot more or made more three-pointers than Golden State. The first time in Game 24 somebody out-threes Golden State. Not a lot of losses are going to happen under those circumstances. So in the real world, though, 24-0, which is just crazy. In a two-point world, they're 20-4. Still an exceptional start. So it gets a little sketchier in the midseason. I think any team in the NBA history would take these numbers, but it looks a little sketchier. They finally lose a game 25. It's still, they evened up on three-point shots. They still would have lost either way. So they would have been 20-5 in the three-less world that I've created. And they lose again. Here, as you see, 2 games in a row. The other team, Dallas and Houston. A Texas two-step of out-threeing the Golden State Warriors. And they had a couple losses down the way. And another overtime game, which I count as a loss. But still some pretty good numbers. There are a couple of circumstances where they actually won the game, as you see here. And I gave them a loss because the 3 discrepancy would have changed the score. One thing you'll notice from a lot of these scores is the games are a lot tighter. Not as many blowouts. That has a lot to do with the three-point shot. So mid-season, they're looking pretty good, 38-11. Won't blow your skirt up, but it's good enough to do pretty well in the league. So here's the home stretch. Some big losses, some big wins. There are more of these losses that were created from not having three-pointers. There were some losses along the way that they just had, which will happen during a season. And they sort of do, as many teams do, sort of peter into the playoffs, and teams were coming at them with a bullet because they didn't want to let that team be 73-9, which they ended up doing. But 61-21 was their final record. Pretty damn good. If you look at the records from the previous season, the only team that had a better record than this year's Golden State last season was last year's Golden State team. So that's a pretty damn good record, even with no three-point shot. So here's a look at the averages for you. The Warriors averaged 13.3 three-pointers a game, ominous number. Their opponents averaged 7.8. Yeah, you're going to win a lot of games that way. So let's look at 61-21 as a finish. It's a better record than 55% of the champs since 1967, which was the first year of 82 games. It's also the exact same record of a very famous team. That would be Michael Jordan's first championship. So this record definitely is a good one. And of course, it's 13 games better than that great Rick Barry team that won the championship, the Golden State's first. So 61-21 is a pretty good record to have if you're making a playoff run. Now let's look at the road to the finals. Houston gave them a good run, beat them once. They out-3'd them twice. And as you'll see on their playoff run, Game 3s are not kind to Golden State. They don't play as well. They get out-3'd. But here's an anomaly right here. During the entire regular season, there was no situation where Golden State gained a game with the 2-point situation. There was not one. So they lost more games under my system. They lost, 13 more games, 12 more games. They didn't gain any games. There was no situation like this where they actually lost a game. But with 2 points and no threes, they win the game. That didn't happen all regular season. So instead of losing that game, they would have won that game if there was no 3-point line, which is insane. It's an insane anomaly that wouldn't have happened if there wasn't a 3-point line. So there you go. Houston would have lost even worse than they already did. Portland is another interesting situation just because, this has got to be so frustrating. You go in with a good game plan. You say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go and we're going to stop them from shooting 3-pointers. These numbers show the discrepancy. They shot more 3-pointers in 3 out of the 5 games and still lost 4-1. That has got to be scary. That's a stat that coaches probably don't tell their players because you want to stop their 3-point shooting and it doesn't help you at all. Now, we get to Oklahoma City. Everybody talked about this series. Everybody counted Golden State out. Obviously, I can't show evidence of this, but I didn't count them out simply because they're the Golden State friggin' Warriors. They've won 140 games in the last 2 seasons. They're going to find ways back. So whether you believe me or not, I had hope in Golden State. I had rooting interest because I'm a Seattle Sonics fan, and I love to see Oklahoma City suffer, which makes this part even more fun for me because I get to live that glorious time just a few short weeks ago. Obviously, it was a tough series. It was the toughest series they've had in a long time. 7 games. It was interesting in many ways. Here we go. We've got a situation where they shot as many three-pointers and they lost, but then they stop them and they still can't win. But by far the most interesting thing is Game 7. Golden State, per usual, gets more three-pointers. They got 10 more three-pointers in Game 7. Everybody says, oh, the reason they won Game 7 was because of three-pointers. No, they didn't. Because if you take away the three-pointers and make them two-pointers, here's the difference. I couldn't believe it myself. I crunched the numbers a zillion times. Still can't believe it. If it was a two-pointer, Golden State would have lost the series. It blows my mind. Absolutely, positively blows my mind. But that's how the numbers crunch. They would have lost, and everybody would talk about how great Oklahoma City is. So that one's for you, Clay Bennett. Suck on that. So we go back to the question. How would they have done without three-pointers? They would most likely still beat your ass, which is true. Not as great, not as historic, but still they would have beat your ass. So with everybody talking about let's get rid of the three-pointer, change the three-pointer, get a four-pointer, da-da-da, guess what? They're going to beat your ass every single way. I have no rooting interest. Bay Area, I'm not from the Bay Area. I don't have a team. But I find this team fascinating. I find the three-pointers fascinating and all the obsession with the three-pointers. But in the end, you know what? It didn't matter. They still beat your ass. Now, it might be a little different, but who knows? So here we are on the cusp of Game 3 of the NBA Finals. We'll see how it all pans out. But in the end, the three-pointers just simply don't matter. So this is Drew Brown signing off for today. I'd like to thank basketball-reference.com. They have all the stats in a nice, neat place, so it's a lot easier to do this. There still was a lot of number crunching, but it was worth it because I thought it was very interesting. So